And interestingly, this brings us to George Soros' accusation towards Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban that he is running a mafia state. The war of words between George Soros and Viktor Orban is threatening to boil over after the billionaire philanthropist claimed Hungary is a mafia state posing as a democracy. He says, Orban sought to frame his policies in a personal conflict between the two of us, and has made me the target of his unrelenting propaganda campaign. The speech was Soros' first public comment in response to the controversial bill proposed in April which threatens to close his Central European University. Orban cast himself in the role of the defender of Hungarian sovereignty, and me as a shady currency speculator who uses his money to flood Europe, particularly his native Hungary, with illegal immigrants as part of some vague but nefarious plot. We'll take a quick look at another article just to see what Soros' opinions on this are. This is an article on Bloomberg from last September where Orban had accused Soros of stoking refugee wave to weaken Europe. Orban accused Soros of being a prominent member of a circle of activists trying to undermine European nations by supporting refugees heading to the continent from the Middle East and beyond. He says, his name is perhaps the strongest example of those who support anything that weakens nation states. They support everything that changes the traditional European lifestyle. These activists who support immigrants inadvertently become of this international human smuggling network. Pretty strong statements, so what does Soros say in reply to this? In an emailed statement, Soros said that a 6-point plan published by his foundation helps uphold European values, while Orban's actions undermines those values. His plan treats the protection of national borders as the objective and the refugees as an obstacle, he said in the statement. Our plan treats the protection of refugees as the objective and national borders as the obstacle. I don't think that it is without good reason that Soros is perceived as what David Rockefeller would have described as an internationalist and Alex Jones would describe as a globalist, because these are two terms for the same thing, people who are fundamentally opposed to national sovereignty and the nation state, including the idea of borders. This is Soros's public position on the issue. So if we return to Soros's previous statement, he cast me as the shady currency manipulator who uses his money to flood Europe, particularly his native Hungary, with illegal migrants as part of some vague but nefarious plot. You have to wonder, who do you think you are kidding, Mr. Soros? We know what you do because you have told us what you want. Orban's response has been very robust and on the money. This is a declaration of war, no doubt. The only network which operates in mafia ways which is not transparent in Hungary is the Soros network. This is why we must insist, and I personally insist, on having a parliament decision on making these organisations transparent. Soros founded the Central European University in 1991 as an independent American academic institution in Hungary. However, the bill introduced by the Hungarian parliament would force the university's closure as it does not have a physical campus in the United States. This university is a colonial outpost to push ideological propaganda. But naturally the optics on this look bad, and the move was seen by some as an attempt to limit free speech and the liberal values of the country. During his speech, Soros praised the tens of thousands of people who marched in protests across Hungary in April while decrying the deception and corruption of the mafia state that the Orban regime has established. That is insurrectionist. That is a deliberate undermining of the democratic government of Hungary, and their decision to take action against a foreign university that is pumping out propaganda in Hungary that will inevitably create the class of people required to facilitate migrants into Hungary. The European Commission also began legal action against the Hungarian government in April, and the European Parliament voted to introduce penalties against the Hungarian government for a breach of EU values, which of course this is. The European Union is directly opposed to the nation state. In fact, the nation state is the thing preventing the European Union from gaining more power. Orban said, "Here there are large predators swimming in the water, and this is the transnational empire of George Soros," adding that Soros-funded organisations are working to bring hundreds of thousands of migrants to Europe. In 2015, Orban described Soros as the strongest example of those who support anything that weakens nation-states. They support everything that changes the traditional European lifestyle. These activists who support immigrants inadvertently become part of this international human smuggling network. The Hungarian parliament is expected to pass the controversial bill later this month, despite widespread condemnation from activists and politicians, and a resolution passed in the European Parliament which condemned the serious deterioration of the rule of law and human rights in Hungary. In my opinion, this is an incredibly disingenuous statement that is designed to deliberately misrepresent the problem. The problem is not that American students are going to university in Hungary, and the problem isn't even really that there is an independent American university in Hungary. The problem of the Central European University is very similar to the problem of Evergreen College. It is not that everything that is taught at this university is wrong or false or dangerous. The problem is that embedded within it are a selection of courses that are deliberately subversive to the concept of the nation-state, the concept of a homogeneous natural culture in that nation-state, and very much encouraging people to be globally focused and encouraging them to be supportive of the mass migration of people. As with Evergreen, these universities are producing a class of people who find no legitimacy in the concept of the nation-state, and will actively work against it, and in the interests of people like George Soros. My problem with this is that I believe that this is actively working against the common interests of the people within the nation-state, the people who are the poorest and least powerful and least able to cope with the increasing globalization of the world. It does not do them any favours to erode their nation's sovereignty and create a class of bourgeois, anti-capitalist, anti-nationalists who despise them at every turn for every reason you can imagine. If it wasn't bad enough that the people coming out of these universities have a fundamental disrespect for the system in which they have been born, raised, and educated, it is the contempt of the people who are not in favour of the destruction of their own nation state that is, in my opinion, one of the worst things. These people cannot be trusted to do good for the people living in these countries, and why would they? They think that the people holding back progress are bigoted Luddites, despite the fact that we know that the refugee crisis has been a disaster, both financially and socially, and there is no sign that Europe's political class is actually going to do anything to help them. Here are some examples of courses you can take at European Central University. Communism and Gender, Historical and Global Perspectives. I don't want to describe this as purely apologetics, but saying that the Soviet Union had achieved impressive economic growth by the 1950s, it promoted women's emancipation, anti-racism and anti-colonialism, and supported progressive movements worldwide, seems to be really downplaying the major problems with the Soviet Union. Saying that many millions of women and men gave their lives in the struggles to establish or defend socialist or communist states, because these states provided their male and female citizens with legal, social, and economic rights and security that many people are lacking nowadays, seems to be a deliberate attempt at historical revisionism to me. What about gendered memories of the Holocaust? Oh, this seems important. It's the emerging field created by the intersection of Jewish studies, memory studies, and gender studies. Perhaps you would enjoy Islamic feminism in historical perspective, with a Master of Arts in Critical Gender Studies, a Master of Arts in European Women's and Gender History, a Master of Arts in Gender Studies, where you will understand Islamic feminism as a diverse movement that reflects many varied streams of interpretation and understanding of gender values and theory based on the breadth of experiences of Muslim women globally. Maybe you'll identify major feminist approaches to Islam, including text-based praxis, transnational ideological mobilization, and theory ranging across Marxist, nationalist, and religious fundamentalist areas of study. Understand Islamic feminist practices within the context of transnational feminist movements against capitalism and globalization. Do you see why the Hungarians are shutting down his university yet? How about a course on transnational migration? A course that aims to assess the usefulness, limitations, and challenges of the transnational migration paradigm in the current historical conjecture. For 20 years ago, in its initial formulation, the transnational paradigm for the study of migration challenged the researchers in multiple disciplines to rethink their approaches to immigration, ethnicity, nationalism, gender, class, status, radicalization, religion, globalization, and family studies. Since that time, there has been a rapid growth of multidisciplinary scholarships, what has sometimes been called transnational studies, and various agencies, including the World Bank and several non-governmental organizations around the globe, began to celebrate transnational migrants as heroes of development. Viktor Orban's characterization of George Soros is completely accurate. He knows what Soros believes, and we know too because Soros has told us. And Soros has been funding universities that provide courses like this that are completely within his modus operandi of trying to achieve his borderless world. I think this is dangerous for the regular people who live within these nation states, and who have to live with the results of these kinds of mass migrations, and I think that this should be resisted wherever it can be. And Viktor Orban shutting down this university is the first step. I don't like the idea of shutting down universities, but I like the idea of these universities creating a class of people who will actively work against their own nation states even less.